Hey there, everyone. So, thanks so much for answering the poll in the Facebook group. So, for context, for anyone who's seeing this outside of a Facebook group, I've created a Facebook group that is specifically for Canadian physicians, answering the big questions I get around financial planning. Only Canadian physicians are allowed in, but I decided to go ahead and record this and also be able to post it like on my YouTube channel and send it out as an email so everyone could benefit from the concepts I'm about to go through. Now, I asked in the group, I asked, what topics do you want me to cover? I put out a poll. I got some votes there, which I really appreciate. So the top ones were actually tied. It was pay off debt versus invest and whole life versus term insurance, which I was pretty interested. I knew pay off debt versus invest would be really high up there, but I didn't think whole life versus term would be up there. So I'm going to go through all those, but there is one fundamental thing that I want to make sure that people understand before they watch any of the other videos, and that is that traditional financial planning advice does not work for physicians. And I'm going to talk about why that is. And I'm going to talk about my journey when I became a financial planner, financial advisor, and was learning all these concepts. And then when I started working with physicians, I saw, oh, wow, a lot of the things that I learned do not apply. And a lot of what you learn out there in the world, if you are learning things from Google or media and things like that, don't fully apply to the physician reality in Canada. And I'm going to go through exactly why that is. So yeah, I'm going to dive into it. And so it's really like financial planning advice, why traditional advice does not work for physicians. And I'm going to go through that right now. And I'm going to pull up my whiteboard so I can draw it out. So if you were to so there's a lot of great books around financial advice in Canada out there, and every time someone recommends me to read one of them, I typically accept the request. I read it, but then what I find really fascinating is sometimes a physician has told me, oh, I read this really great book, and I read it and I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't really fully apply to your situation, and I'm going to talk about why. So if you were to search like financial advice for Canadians, what you would find a lot of would be the concepts of like RRSP versus TFSA. I'm sure there's like just thousands of articles about that. Different types of insurance, how much you should have of which kind. There'd be articles about certainly some about paying off debt versus investing, but I'm going to talk about when I do that video, I'm going to talk about the unique difference between doctors and everyone else or most other Canadians versus pay off debt versus invest. And here's the thing, like as someone is stuck trying to make a decision between just one of the simple ones like RSP versus TFSA, big debates out there in and outside of the physician community as to whether you should do that or not. Big debate as to whether you should pay off your debt, like tackle your debt or invest. I can do drawing quickly here. So kind of like this person's just kind of stuck in the middle. Like, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? And one of the things that compounds it for physicians that I want to touch on really quickly before I talk about like the unique physician situation as to why the advice that you're going to find commonly when you Google these topics is not going to apply to you. One of the things that's compounded is physicians. I don't know how it compares to the general population, but I do know for a fact, pulling back the curtain, that physicians are conflicted around the advice that they're getting when they go out there and look it up. And I know this because I put a survey out there to a group of Canadian physicians. I had over 100 physicians answer the survey. I had some friends share it among their peers, getting out there into the hands of many Canadian physicians as possible. And these were the results of that. I asked a few questions in there. These are the top two that I found really enlightening. I asked the question, how do you feel about your financial situation? You've got it all figured out, or you wish you knew who to, wish you knew who to talk to, or you're confused about where to start with financial planning and you don't know who to trust. Over half of the physicians, 58% of them answered yes to the question, are you confused about where to start with financial planning and you don't know who to trust? So over half of them agreed with that statement. And then when it comes to corporate financial planning, which is a spoiler alert as to like why the doctor situation is so different, 80% of the people who answered said they were not at all confident or only somewhat confident that they were using their corporation efficiently. And one of the reasons why this exists, I believe, is because there's a lot of conflicting opinions out there. A lot of physicians are starting to, I shouldn't say a lot, but I'd say there's an increase in information being supplied by physicians who are starting things like podcasts to enlighten their colleagues as to the things that they've learned about financial planning. There are a couple of American physicians that are really big into sharing what they've learned about financial planning. And the first thing I'll say is the American situation is completely different. And in each video, I can talk about something that's said by the Americans that doesn't apply in Canada. And when it comes to colleagues who've created content or are doing interviews, a lot of they're sharing a lot of great content, but what can be confusing is you'll find two physicians standing side by side. And I've literally seen this happen in a room where one says one thing, is a really great idea, and the other one immediately after will say, no, that thing is a terrible idea. So you're kind of stuck in the middle, like this person, little stick figure down here, kind of like wondering who to trust around all of these questions. Now, what makes the physician situation unique is that when this person is over here confused about these questions, even the question of RSP versus TFSA is not a slam dunk out in the world. And I know, actually, it's quite interesting. I have a video out that talks about this, and it talks about how I don't usually make blanket black or white statements like no one should ever have a TFSA or everyone should have a TFSA. There's a lot of nuances. My job is to help people figure out what's going to work specifically for them. I had someone post an article that said, "Oh, in this article it says physicians should use a TFSA," and then I found another article. So this is from a highly regarded accountant in Canada. I found an article from another highly regarded accountant in Canada that says you should not. So it's like even the accountants can't agree on whether it is or not. The beauty is though, like when I work with people, I can figure out exactly what works for their situation. Like for some people, it doesn't make sense. For some people, it doesn't make sense. So I can figure it exactly out. Now, why is the physician situation unique? Is because there is the corporation. So whatever layer of complexity or level of complexity there was about these types of conversations of do I do an RSP or a TFSA? Do I pay off debt or do I invest? What kind of insurance should I get and what kind? Once the corporate structure is put in, the medicine professional corporation is put in the mix, it adds a layer of complexity that makes it much more difficult to answer that question. And people will oftentimes have their own slant on it of what they've done and what works and what they've done and doesn't work. But the corporation adds a layer of complexity because, I'm going to clean this up a little bit so I can draw something, is because once a physician is incorporated, like, and I'm going to do a whole video on this, but once a physician is incorporated, like you now have control. So if you make $100 before you had the corporation, or if you don't have a corporation, you don't have a lot of control over how that $100 is paid to you. It's basically paid to you, and it gets added to your marginal, it gets added to your tax rate. And the more you pay, the more money you make, the higher up you go in your marginal tax rate. When you have a corporation, the money lands in the corporation, and then you have to decide how to pay yourself, when, and how much. The money that's left inside, you have to decide how to invest it in a way that's tax efficient so you can not have to worry so much about passive income rules and different kinds of taxes that are going to be charged when you invest inside of the corporation. So the traditional advice, which is going to spend a lot of time trying to, the RSP versus TFSA at the end of the day for the physician, it is an important thing to figure out, but I would argue that like how to use the corporation efficiently is a far more important conversation to have, because it is I had an interview with a physician who has his own podcast recently, and he called it a gift. He's like, the corporate structure is a gift to physicians. And I agree with that. There are some tax changes that have occurred over the last years that have definitely shifted the way that a corporation is used, but it is still a very powerful tool in creating, creating and using wealth as a Canadian physician. So I am going to dive into the other topics that have been voted on, like pay off debt versus invest, whole life insurance versus term insurance, how to make the most of my corporation, how to make my own pension, index funds versus mutual funds. I won't answer all those, but I wanted this fundamental um, thing to be top of mind as I go through all of those. Thanks for joining me. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to comment below. If you're watching on Facebook, also comment or send me a DM and ask me any question you like about financial planning. And if you'd like to sit down and talk more about the work I do, go to galenhelpsdocs.com or the link below to book an initial no strings attached consultation just to see if we're a good fit for my financial planning services. All right, thanks so much.